You're listening to the Friends Talking Nerdy Podcast Network.
Friends Talking Nerdy. If your friends are nerdy and you are nerdy too, I want to talk to you. Friends Talking Nerdy.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Friends Talking Nerdy, the flagship show on the Friends Talking Nerdy Podcast Network. My name is Tim Jousma, and joining me all the way in snowy Maine, it's the Reverend Tracy. How you doing?
Oh, I mean, I would say that I can't complain, but I say that a lot. So I think I am going to complain. Actually, no, it's not really that bad with the snow. I did have a new to hear error and also an error in reading instructions for my apartment complex that led into a little bonus adventure today. Mm-hmm. But I was actually just talking with Tim off of air, outside of the recording space about how, you know, I was warned a lot about the snow here, right? And how it can be, you know, very inhibiting to life. But I think like years ago, I would have never moved into a situation like this. But it's been kind of nice to be here in a place that, you know, they kind of know that everybody has to deal with the snow, and I'm in an office job. So the old retail versions of my life, you know, used to get really stressed out about driving in any snow, like back in Texas, et cetera, because I knew they wanted me in. There's actually one time I almost had a very horrific accident in Texas because I needed to get to work because it was Black Friday and it snowed. So of course I still needed to be there at the butt crack of dawn. And I've actually very honestly lost control of my car. To me, it is still kind of a miracle I didn't at least bump into anything and able to get out of it. Mm-hmm. But I don't live in that stress anymore. You know, I've got a job that was pretty cool that even if they said, hey, we really need you to be physically in there, they would probably just tell me to take my time and get there as soon as I could. So it's a bit different than living in places that can be a little bit more callous to it because it's not such a regular occurrence. You know what I mean? So that's been kind of refreshing. Although it was really funny, I had mentioned kind of a learning curve that I will gladly share because what is this podcast not for than for some light self-deprecation at times. So I misread an email and thought that I needed to move my car today. The answer is you don't move your car during a snowstorm. And I think any Mainer knows that is a fact. Like they would have never tried to move their car during this storm. And because I am new here and did not understand that this is just kind of a common baseline thought, mm-hmm. I moved my car during the time that the email said to move my car. So then I went to move my car back and naturally I got stuck. I didn't know what to do. I actually kind of started to panic a little because I couldn't find my cables. I couldn't find anything to get me out of this situation quickly. So I wound up calling the handy dandy person who works here that I've become friends with. And he very valiantly came and rescued me with a snow shovel and a little bit of a push from behind. So we had a good laugh about, you know, I'm learning how to live in Maine. And this is one of those lessons I'm not going to soon forget, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it only takes one time to do that, and you will never, ever not do it again until you absolutely need to be somewhere, you know, like yesterday.
Oh, yeah. Like I had cold toes and a bruised ego, but I was okay in the end. But yeah, I got my car back and now I'm just continuing to work from home. Because as mentioned, being in an office, you know, my boss just said, hey, take home the laptop. And I guess we'll figure out if we'll use this as an opportunity to make sure you can work remotely if it needs to happen. So at least it was productive. But it's beautiful outside nonetheless. And the Mr. Reverend actually just walked to work. Because, you know, we're mountaineering people. So we actually have like the footwear and the layers and everything. So for him, he just walked and I straight told him, I was like, man, in the future, I might just bus and walk in because, man, this would have been a day to get some really awesome stuff done on the floor and just play Spotify on speakerphone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the joys too of snow days. If you're one of the few people that can show up to work alone, you have a little more leeway to have a little more fun.
Oh, exactly. So how's the weather in good old Portland, Oregon?
Well, it's doing its usual. We just got over our bit of snow here, so that ended up melting a couple of days ago. Yesterday it was actually in the 50s for a bit, but it's still pretty dreary. So I like it.
Of course. But yeah, it's kind of funny because the snow that was here when we landed, returning from New Year, was still here. Because we're now at that point in Maine where it's cold enough that it's not going to melt the snow that accumulates on the side. So the streets we're fine, like completely bone dry, but still mounds of snow, like in areas, especially where the plows like pushed it up in places. So it'll be fun, like kind of adapting to this, new climate.
Well, let's move on with the show here. I'm not good with segues today. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. I think we all forgive you.
Yeah, all 20 people who listen. Thank you very much.
I wasn't going to out our number like that, but Tim does Tim.
Well, I've mentioned it before. But December 31st, 2021, the world heard some bad news, and you're the one who filled me in on it. So let our audience know.
Yes. I mean, I think the people who are even out of the loop know this one at this point. But American sweetheart Betty White closed her eyes for a final time on this mortal existence and is now in that awesome kitchen in the sky, probably hanging out with the rest of the Golden Girls. Hey, guys, joke's on you. You made a joke about Golden Girls reunions. Here it is. So she did pass away. It was actually kind of a moment in the grocery store where I couldn't figure out if it was a too soon joke or not, but it did make me kind of like giggle a little, was the thought that I think People magazine, it's their fault. They jinxed it because I was at the store and I could see Betty White turns 100. I'm like, this is your fault. Like there's part of me that wanted to have that emotional reaction. So, and it goes back to like how I felt when Gene Wilder passed away. That's the only one that I've actually cried. I didn't cry when Betty died, or when I found out that she had died. I definitely didn't cry like when she died. That would be a weird like psychic connection like to have to Betty White. But no, I did not shed tears personally when I found out she had passed away. Mostly, I guess, because in a way, it didn't surprise me, right? Because she was getting up there in age, and like Jean in a weird way was a little bit more surprising for me than Betty was. But it's kind of it's still sad, and I know that there are people who cried, and I'm not making fun of that at all ever. We do connect with these people. We are social animals. That's why it's like during this pandemic, a lot of us have really gone to social media, and so even though it's a face in a screen and it's a television screen and not interacting with you, these people do still very much influence like who you turn into as a person sometimes. And she has had just such an amazing fucking career. So I don't even need to go into that. You can scroll her IMDb page, and I know I'm going to share some things here in a little bit that will reflect the awesome career of this just fantastic actor.
Yeah, I mean, as a kid in the 80s, my first exposure to her was the Golden Girls. Yep. And even though I didn't like the theme song, and in fact, I have a tape for everybody at home that I'm going to play right now of my sister singing that song. So here we go. I'm going to press play. Anyway, that wasn't that.
That must have been one of your favorite things as a kid, was hearing your sister. Actually, what's funny is I love that theme song, but I don't have like any negative connotation to it. Like, I think we have talked about the theme song before because I'm pretty sure the Golden Girls have come up on like when we were doing the Nerdy Five on the regular. Because I feel like we've had this conversation before. But yeah, I still like think of Thank You for Being a Friend. It's just kind of a fun song. I think it was one of the more appropriate matches of song to show. Like it fit well. I never felt it got old.
You weren't in my house.
Exactly. Like I think if my mother had been singing it like a broken record, probably a different story. But my memories of hearing the Golden Girls, theme song was, that we were done chorin for the day because, I was raised on a farm. So we had chorin. So I didn't get to go home and just watch cartoons. I had to go home and take care of livestock and take care of the stuff in the barn. And then in the evening, we got to watch Nick at Night. And so that's where we watched like a lot of stuff like that. Pretty sure Golden Girls was on Nick at Night, but if it wasn't that, it was kind of in that time span and then sometimes on the weekends. But I really like that show. I don't remember getting the sexual jokes as a kid, but I was extremely amused by the show, like as I got older. And I think it's one of the few that honestly manages to age well, because it's a lot of it that's still kind of funny about older women and how, or really older people, because right, we still get kind of this weird like ageist thing almost, where we assume you hit a certain age and all you do is sit on the couch and watch TV. Mm-hmm. But it was fun to see like somebody portraying that, yeah, they're not just like grandmas, like they do things and they sometimes date. And so it was a topic that nobody really covered. So especially when I was reintroduced into adulthood, I thought the show was even cooler in a way, like for that, for kind of taking away some of the weird stigmas that we have with older people. And Betty White also, that just like is her spirit anyway, because she just continued to keep doing that. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember like some of the storylines they would have, like they had a storyline where Blanche thought she was pregnant, but it turns out it was the start of menopause. And like in the 80s, I mean, think about that. I mean, like you probably would have a hard time having a storyline about that now, since you don't have too many women of, age 30 or older that are getting too much work,
Exactly. But some fun trivia through all of that too, because I know I've even shared trivia on the Golden Girls in the past. So
mm-hmm. What is that trivia you got for us?
Okay, so let's see. This is our rough segue, because we're so emotional about Betty. That's what we could just totally put it on that, guys. But anyway, I went to go look for some trivia on Betty White, because this is the way that I almost like to nerd out about people. If I didn't know about them in their life, I kind of get inspired to learn about them in their death. But of course, because Betty White is just so fucking awesome, Mental Floss put together a list of 15 things, very concise paragraphs. So I just thought I could share those very briefly. And then Tim, I'm sure some of these you might know. I'm sure we'll talk about them if you did know or didn't. Mm-hmm. But here we go. So quick 15 things you probably didn't know about Betty. Number one, I thought was kind of cool. Her name was Betty, not Elizabeth. She was born in 1922 in Illinois. For people who'd never asked and never knew that, now you know. The future television icon was born Betty Marion White, the only child of homemaker Christine Tess and Lightning Company executive Horace Logan White. In her autobiography, If You Ask Me, and of course you won't, White explained her parents specifically named her Betty because they didn't like any of the nicknames derived from Elizabeth. So they basically wanted to have control over calling their kid Betty and didn't want to have like an offshoot of a different nickname, I guess. But so her name is not Elizabeth, it is Betty, or was Betty.
I think the common mistake, though, is that I believe she had a sitcom in the 50s called Life with Elizabeth, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yes, and that does get brought up in here for a totally different reason. And I thought it was even funnier because when I had read through these before, I'm like, wait, but her name's not Elizabeth. So, number two, Betty White was a Guinness Book record holder. In 2014 edition of the record-keeping tome, White was awarded the title of longest TV career for an entertainer, female demographic, though, so because they still kind of separate some of those for the world record stuff. Uh-huh. So that's for her more than 70 years in show business. The year before, Guinness gave longest TV career for an entertainer, male, to longtime British TV host Bruce Forsyth, and both began their careers at the same time in 1939. They would still be neck and neck for the title were they not separated by gender. So thought that was kind of cool. She is a record holder there. Her first television appearance is long lost to history. Even White couldn't remember the name of the show she made her screen debut on in 1939. But in an interview with Guinness World Records, she recounted the life-changing event, saying, "I danced on an experimental TV show, the first on the West Coast in downtown Los Angeles. I wore my high school graduation dress, and our Beverly Hills High student body president, Harry Bennett, and I danced the Merry Widow Waltz." So I'm bummed. I would love to see like this old footage. I hope somebody like maybe now, because it's made a mental floss thing, and we know how these internet sleuths get, right? Maybe they can find this for us, and we can see the awesome Betty White the first time she was ever on TV. Maybe.
I hope so. The problem is like a lot of TV back in the days was done live, and the only reason we have a lot of these old TV shows is a kinescope where they would point a movie camera at a TV and record, what was going on. So, hopefully, fingers crossed, we can find something. But especially if it was experimental in 39,
probably not. Yeah, because there's the lady that also had the tapes recording. I don't know if you'd ever heard about her, but she had been just obsessively recording every TV channel. And they're going through all of her tapes right now. See, you're nodding. So I think you're recalling the story. Am I reading your face right?
No, I don't recall.
Okay. So there is. So if again, something that nobody asked, because the Reverend is great at giving information that nobody asks for. There is a woman who I'm pretty sure I'm remembering correctly that she passed away, and she had been recording all of the channels. And right now they're actually trying to like pull all of the stuff from the VHS tapes. But anyway, I might share that one just for fun as a side note in our group. I'm sure I can find the article on that. Yes. So factoid number 4, White's initial rise to stardom was derailed by World War II. It really kind of solidifies that she is in fact older than sliced bread, which was one of the funnier facts that I had shared like a long time ago and glammed onto. But yeah, I guess before she took off on television, she was working in theater, on radio, and as a model. But with World War II, she shelved her ambitions and joined the American Women's Voluntary Services. Her days were devoted to delivering supplies via PX truck throughout the Hollywood Hills, but her nights were spent at rousing dances thrown to give grand send-offs to soldiers set to ship out. Of that era, she told Cleveland Magazine, "It was a strange time and out of balance with everything."
Well, yeah, I mean, and for folks, if you go back a few episodes in the archive here, on the day she passed away, I was able to find one of her radio performances. It was an episode of This Is Your FBI called The Larcenous Bride.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to go back and listen to that one. So number 5, her first sitcom hit was in the early 1950s. So co-hosting on Al Jarvis' show Hollywood on Television led to White producing her own vehicle, Life with Elizabeth. As a rare female producer, she developed the show alongside emerging writer and producer George Tibbles, who would go on to work on such beloved shows as Dennis the Menace, Leave It to Beaver, etc. Though the show is not remembered much today, in 1951 it did earn White her first of 21 Emmy nominations. Of these, she has won 5 times, by the way. So they threw like a bonus factoid in there with that one. So I'm wondering if she's like won the most. I would think they would have brought that up at this point if it was like she had won the most.
Yeah, and you got to imagine like there's probably a man somewhere that probably has more. Maybe in this. Yeah, it probably is going to be a guy that probably has more, probably somebody in the 70s or. Yeah.
I mean, I know it's not on this list because I already skimmed through it. Just, I couldn't help myself. Yeah. But, so it's like, yeah, maybe not the most, but that's a heck of a lot of times, even just for nominations. That's a lot. Another fun thing about good old Betty, she loved a good parade, apparently. From 1962 to 1971, White hosted NBC's Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade alongside Bonanza's Lorne Greene. But that's not all. For 20 years, between 56 and 76, she was also a color commenter for NBC's annual Tournament of Roses parade. However, as her fame grew on CBS's The Mary Tyler Moore Show, NBC decided they should pull White and all the rival promotion that came with her from the parade. It was a decision that was heartbreaking for White, who told People magazine, "On New Year's Day, I just sat at home feeling wretched, watching someone else do my parade." So she chose to give up hosting parades and, to stay with Mary Tyler Moore. Like, it kind of stinks to hear that, right? Like, that she had to make that decision.
Yeah. I mean, on the one hand, it does that NBC didn't have the foresight to just let her do her thing. But at the end of the day, her role on Mary Tyler Moore was funny as hell. Sue Ann Nivens was, I mean, if you haven't watched that show, you got to watch that show.
There's like this one little area, like I saw something that was just clips of stuff, and she was talking about, like, she was sitting in a seat, and this is in the Mary Tyler Moore show. And I'm actually not super familiar with Mary Tyler Moore. That was a show that when it played as a kid, I just checked out on. I don't know why. It just wasn't my interest. Mm-hmm. But there was a clip that it showed her talking about, like, oh, it's a tight space, especially for somebody like with like breasts or something. And then, so she turns to Mary Tyler Moore and says, "You should be fine, though." I was like, "Ooh, God, shade." So
there's another one. There's another scene that was her character was like a happy homemaker. So she had a cooking segment, but the stove for the cooking segment broke or something like that. It wasn't turned on. And so she turned to the camera that she was doing the show. It's like, "Oh, we just have a slight malfunction. We'll be right back," with a sweet smile on her face. Someone says cut. And she goes, "Who the hell is responsible for this?"
Yeah, I think I need to watch some Mary Tyler Moore. It sounds like, because I think I missed on some pivotal Betty White stuff. And granted, there's even another show, and I will bring that up because it comes up on this list at some point, that I am thrilled and have discovered.
But Mary Tyler Moore, created by James L. Brooks, who went on to create The Simpsons, who is responsible for numerous other TV shows. It has some of the best writing in sitcom history. Like, you are missing out if you have not seen it. So,
yes. So I'm now feeling that I'm missing out and need to go back. Next on the list is, apparently she was married 3 times. Why? So I guess her first husband, his name was Dick Barker. They were married and divorced within the same year. After 4 months on Barker's rural Ohio chicken farm, White fled back to Los Angeles and her career as an entertainer. Soon after, she met agent Lane Allen, who became her husband in 47 and her ex-husband in 49, after he pushed her to quit show business. So it's like, you learn really quick, like, this is how dedicated to show business this human really was. Now you've got the parades that she could have quit show business probably and kept doing her parades. And then, like, the first guy she ran off to a chicken farm with, classic. I love this. And I mean, kind of running off to a chicken farm doesn't sound like anything I would be chomping at the bit to go to, like, when you put it that way. But yeah, the fact that she came back, but she did marry again in 63 after she fell for widower, father of 3, and game show host Alan Ludden, thank you. And I will always take a correction on how to say somebody's names. Alan Ludden. So things I didn't know about Betty.
Yeah, actually, Alan was a big game show host in the 60s and 70s. By the time I started watching TV, I think his time had passed. But believe it or not, Alan Ludden is one of the people responsible for giving David Letterman his big break.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I actually posted a video clip from YouTube on the group page. There's a guy on YouTube that just finds all the old David Letterman clips that he can find, and then he'll, like, sometimes put compilations together. And I guess David Letterman in the early 70s, I guess, or late 60s, early 70s, had a radio show in Indianapolis, and Alan Ludden was a guest on the show, was really impressed, said, "If you ever make your way to Los Angeles, connect with me." David Letterman did, spent time at the house with both Alan and Betty. There is game show footage of David Letterman and Betty White together. So, we got to thank Alan and Betty White. And also, one more thing, I did read an article from her publicist or assistant or something like that was with her when she died. And apparently her last word was Alan.
Oh, of course. That makes it even more beautiful, because fact number 8 is a bit of a continuation on Alan Ludden. Betty was a regular on the game show circuit, so she apparently really liked to be a celebrity guest and be involved. And she did eventually land on Password, which was hosted by Alan Ludden. And she like fell in love with him, I guess, even though she initially rebuffed Ludden's engagement ring. And I don't know if you knew this about Alan Ludden, but apparently he wore it around his neck until she changed her mind. The pair stayed together until his death in 1981, and today their stars are on Hollywood Walk of Fame, and they sit side by side.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting there, but in the video footage from David Letterman, it's actually mentioned.
Oh, nice. So cool. So I learned that this way. Did you know that before, like finding the new footage? Like, did you learn it recently like me?
I remember it from there. There was also, I don't know if it's on there. I think it's there till the 11th on Netflix. There is a Betty White documentary on Netflix until January 11th that brought that up as well, and actually showed a picture with him wearing the necklace with the ring. And then, she said, ultimately she said she regretted that she waited that long because she could have had that extra time being married to the person she loved and all that.
Yeah, I totally get it though. But I mean, also she seemed to have this experience of men trying to take her away from her passion. Mm-hmm. So I could kind of understand the hesitancy, but also it's like she didn't exactly seem to live in regret. She did. I mean, one thing I think most people would say about Betty is she seemed to really live it up all the way to the end. Oh, yeah. And we'll even get to some of that and some of the comments that people make too. But and this actually next bit of trivia, I have shared this one before, that White originally auditioned for the role of Blanche, or was supposed to be, Blanche initially, but they had wound up changing their minds. The nice little concise explanation here: producers of the series thought of White for the role of the ensemble's promiscuous party girl because she'd long played lusty Sue Ann Nivens on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. So that's the character that we were just talking about. Meanwhile, they eyed Rue McCallaghan for the part of the naive country bumpkin Rose because of her work as the sweet but dopey Vivian Harmon on Maude, which is another show that is on my tick list to watch now, mostly because of this trivia fact. Director Jay Sandrich was worried about typecasting, so he asked the two to switch in the auditions. And just like that, the Golden Girls history was made. So that was something that I still thought was cool before. And I really do love, and it shows her range. Both of them, honestly, like that. It's good that, you can get out of a rut of doing the same thing. And I do love a good character actor, and there's nothing wrong with somebody who does a good typecast. But I think it does say something very phenomenal about an actor when they have range and don't go for a typecast career. Not that there's anything wrong with it. And sometimes that can really make a really solid character in a really good movie when you do pick somebody who is really good at playing a specific character. But I loved Betty in all of her range. And then she did get a little bit typecasted in the end, though, I guess we could say, because of the funny grandma. But I didn't see her do much serious in the end. But I'm not sure she ever did serious.
She actually did. I believe there's a movie called, I think it's called Lake Placid. It was a David E. Kelley horror movie in the 90s about an alligator that killed people, I think, or something like that. And
yes, and at the end, she's silly in that one too, though. She's I kind of struggle to call that a serious character. Because first of all, a good indicator that it wasn't that scary is the fact that I saw it a long time ago, So
fair enough there. But that did remind me, there was, I don't know the name of it, but it was mentioned in the documentary. Later in her life, she did do a drama on Lifetime or something like that. So it wasn't an Oscar-worthy drama, but they did show a scene to where she was at a casket crying, and the character's name was that was dead was Alan. So obviously, as an actress, she was channeling a lot of personal stuff there. So she's done it, but primarily, she is comedy.
Yeah. But by the way, if you're curious what she would have done if she had not become an actor, hands down, she confessed in a 2014 interview she would be a zookeeper. This should come as little surprise to those who were aware of White's reputation as an avid animal lover and activist. Not only did she try to visit the local zoo of wherever she traveled, but she was also a supporter of the farm animal reform movement and Friends of Animal groups. as well as a Los Angeles Zoo board member. That one I didn't know, who donated, quote, tens of thousands of dollars over the past several decades. In 2010, White founded a t-shirt line whose profits go to the Morris Animal Foundation, one of her most beloved charities. So I actually did not know that Betty White was that much of an animal lover. I think some stuff had whispered past, but as does anything when you surf for vegan recipes, because you will get those targeted pop-up things. So I was mildly aware of it, but not to the tune that she did it. Like there's a documentary and other things that she's done too that I find fascinating and look forward to. I love documentaries. How have I not seen one that she was involved in?
Well, you have till January 11th. But speaking of animals, there were plenty of articles that came out after she passed away. One was an interview that somebody did with Vicki Lawrence. Vicki Lawrence, I don't know if you're familiar with the TV show Mama's Family.
No.
Okay, thank goodness. But that was a show that was a spinoff of the Carol Burnett show that Betty White actually was on for a bit. It was on just a little bit before the Golden Girls. But Vicki Lawrence told about a story to where they were doing rehearsal. Betty White was never late for rehearsal, but the one day she was, everybody was worried. And this was before cell phones. And she was like an hour late and people were freaking out. But then she shows up. Turns out she was driving from Palm Springs to the studio, saw a couple of golden retrievers in the road in Palm Springs, stopped her car in the middle of the road, got the dogs into her car, drove them to, I believe, her house or someplace safe, and then went back to work. She stopped traffic in Palm Springs, California to save a couple of dogs. I mean, that kicks.
Of course. Yeah. I would be floored if I learned that she did anything really super bad, like of obvious intent to hurt somebody. It would surprise me because it doesn't really seem to be her nature. And I love it when that's what I continue to learn about somebody. Mm-hmm. Even moving just right into another fact, because it's another animal love one. Apparently she turned down the role on As Good as It Gets because of the scene where Jack Nicholson puts the dog down the laundry chute or the trash chute of his apartment. She actually tried to go. She complained to the director, James L. Brooks, in hopes of having the scene cut. Instead, they kept it and cast Shirley Knight in the role instead. So her point was, she talked about a little bit on the Joy Behar show. She explained, all I could think of was all the people out there watching that movie. And if there's a dog in that building that's barking or they don't like, boom, they do it. And I like that she was concerned about that, right? Because I've mentioned on the show a few times that our shows and stuff are, in a sense, programming. Mm-hmm. We kind of put in it what we normalize, right? So I do kind of understand, like, to a point where you don't want certain things to be seen, especially as being glorified. So I guess, like, some people would maybe knock Betty for that. It makes me kind of appreciate her more because that's a message that I do kind of understand.
I mean, we'll touch upon that very topic when we transition, but it's like there are people that can be a little touchy when they don't need to be, but it's a lot of times if you don't have those people standing up, most people aren't going to think of the problem of putting a dog down a garbage chute or something like that. You know, they just think it's funny, but they don't think of the consequences of somebody actually getting pissed and actually doing that. Because what if it went down to like an incinerator or something like that?
Exactly. And it goes back to, I worry sometimes about some of the stuff that we seem to glorify in movies or seem to be passing as a normal way of dealing with stuff, rather than ever acknowledging that maybe that wasn't normal and that person needed to maybe work on their anger issues.
A little bit.
So we are on number 12. I'm trying to get through these so it doesn't eat up necessarily a whole bunch more time. Excuse me. We can actually thank a Facebook campaign for Betty White being the oldest person to ever host Saturday Night Live. In 2010, a Facebook group called Betty White to host SNL please, question mark, gathered so many fans, nearly 1 million, and so much media attention that SNL executive producer Lorne Michaels was happy to make it happen. At 88 years old, White set a new record. Her episode, for which many of the show's female alums returned, also won rave reviews and gave the show's highest ratings in 18 months. White won her 5th Emmy for that performance.
Yeah, they did replay that episode this past Saturday on Saturday Night Live. And, from interviews I've read from people that have hosted that show, Saturday Night Live is really grueling. It's it's not like a 9-to-5 job. It's you're doing, if you're not sleeping, you're preparing for that show. And to do that, to do everything that she did at 88, she did multiple sketches. That is amazing.
You're preparing for improv and to step into a situation that hopefully and ideally at the end of it, you're able to successfully work many skits as if you work with them on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. To me, it is no mystery that would be hard. In its own kind of special. And that's why some of them are really good and some of them are bad, but bad isn't not funny though. I think of, Ryan Gosling when he was on there. I think he's the pretty boy sweetheart I'm thinking of that did the alien, the UFO bits that I love so much. Pretty sure, but he broke character. He wasn't necessarily the great in some of his skits, but it's still super entertaining. And he's an excellent actor. Mm-hmm. But it also goes that improv and acting can be different things. And just with it being so exhausting, they're not just getting up and doing a skit. They're doing several skits that they've tried to put on concept for. But so that's just amazing.
Wardrobe changes in between the commercials and makeup, wigs. They got tons of stuff they have to do.
Exactly. It's a whole team. It's not an easy job. And it's there's part of me that kicks myself for not wanting to watch SNL more. I know my ex-husband was really into it, but it was something I'll watch it from time to time and I do like it. But I think I need to look up the Betty White SNL episode. I bet I would super enjoy that. So fact number 13, she was the oldest person to earn an Emmy nomination. And this is how I discovered that this amazing show called Betty White's Off Their Rockers exists. So she was 92 and she got the nomination and everything. And I didn't know that she made this, but essentially Off Their Rockers is a prank TV show, but with all elderly actors. So it's a bunch of Betty White's pranking youngsters. And I think the absolute best thing I've seen so far is what's called the cupcake bit. Mm-hmm. And spoiler alert here. So if you want to pause it and go look it up, it's not long to watch it, but really, if you put in Off Their Rockers and cupcake, you'll find it. I'll actually probably share it on the page if I haven't already, because I shared it on my personal one. But what essentially happens is this older lady tricks this young girl on a bike, young woman on a bike, not a girl. Mm-hmm. But, to help her get into this car, she's got this clothes hanger and she's trying to pop the lock, right? But the window's cracked enough where the lady's oh, here, and unlocks it. Mm-hmm. And the lady goes, yes, can you get me those cupcakes? So she answered this box of cupcakes and the old lady gives her a cupcake and to thank her, closes it, shuts the door, starts wiping the window off. We shouldn't leave any evidence. And then thank you, and walks away. And the girl's holding the cupcake wait, is this your car? So just fucking epic. So it's really, it seems to be a well done humor prank show, which I think I might enjoy. I've watched a few of them and they've been pretty good. I don't normally like prank shows, but this one I think is actually pretty clever and pretty funny. So I would suggest checking it out if you're into prank shows at all.
Nice.
So number 14, I guess her secret to living long was not a healthy diet, because Betty White apparently really loved junk food. The key to aging gracefully has nothing to do with health food as far as White was concerned. In 2011, her Hot in Cleveland co-star, Jane Leaves, dished on White's snacking habits, saying she eats red vines, hot dogs, French fries, and Diet Coke. If that's key, maybe she's preserved because of all the preservatives. And then another co-star actually like concurred with it by saying she eats red licorice like ridiculously a lot. She seems to exist on hot dogs and French fries.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, but you got to imagine too. I mean, she's been relatively wealthy by American standards for a long time, so she probably is able to eat a lot more of this stuff because she's able to work out more and do whatever that other comparable people who have far less money were able to do. You know.
Right. And I have no idea if her diet was always like that, right? Like, I don't know. Hot in Cleveland was not at the height of like her modeling career. So I could totally see that being just something she developed older. Like, especially when you no longer have to watch your figure for roles, because that is kind of a benefit if you can be a female actor making it long enough. And somebody to the point that Betty White did, like Betty White didn't have to watch her figure anymore at a point. Like that's almost the one saving grace with age, right? Is in, you know, acting and stuff. Like you don't need to be a hot grandma. You need to be, what was she? She was a funny grandma. A lot of the times, you know, I think of like Grandma's Boy, because wasn't she one of the grandmas in Grandma's Boy too?
I never watched
that. I watched it once and I probably was really high. It was a long time ago, and I think I really got coerced into it. And it was just one of those situations. I was hanging out with friends, like after work, like back in Arizona or something. They're like, "Let's watch this movie," and I'm like, "Well, like, let's go outside for 20 minutes, and then I'll be willing to watch that movie." But just to wrap it up, so there's one last one here. If you're curious if she had any regrets when she passed away, I guess she did. She really wanted to like work with Robert Redford, apparently. There was a ever quotable White, because how she phrases things to be like quirky and funny. Once she gave a cheeky confession. My answer to anything under the sun, like, what have you not done in the business that you've always wanted to do, is Robert Redford. Though she had more than 110 film and television credits on her filmography, White never worked with the Out of Africa star, who was 14 years her junior. So I guess she just really wanted to work with him, but she was kind of making cheeky jokes about it instead. But I actually, was there anything like that you learned about her, by the way, that wasn't on this list? Because there was something that I learned that I thought was funny that I didn't know until the news broke that she had passed.
No, every little bit of information I learned of her, I have already tossed in. So what else did you learn about her?
So the whole thing with her and Ryan Reynolds, which I think is adorable and hilarious. I had no idea that they had this back and forth thing. And somebody even made a meme. It's like ultimate Betty White move was, I guess she was recently on an interview with him again and had said like, "You're going to have to get over me." And then like to basically tell Ryan Reynolds that you're going to have to get over me, and then dies. Like, and so, but that led me, it was somebody making a joke. So deflection with humor. Yeah. And it was very well put, like, you know, better than I could describe it because it's a meme. So it's meant to be read. Right. So it was really funny, but it made me aware of like this whole back and forth that I guess they had since the proposal. When they worked together on that one with Sandra Bullock, which was a movie that I remember actually enjoying. Shaman Betty was really, really great. But yeah, that's the only other thing that I learned that wasn't on this list, because I learned a lot from this list. I will gladly share it. And the one thing that I wanted to super end this topic with is I'm going to shamelessly plug something that I didn't create. I just think it's awesome and cool. But there is apparently something that is going around social media. It's a social media challenge I can actually support. So it's the Betty White Challenge. And essentially on January 17th, the social media folks have just decided to encourage everybody and anybody who wants to participate to donate $5 to an animal rescue or shelter in Betty White's name. And just to do that, it was a big passion of hers. She died just so tragically right before her 100th birthday. So I think if you're looking for a way to honor Betty, I support this, because you're just giving money to a shelter that's going to help take care of those animals. And that's a really great cause to kind of support. I don't think you have to be too particular about which ones. just, especially if you've like adopted through one before, just throw them $5 and put it in the name of Betty White on January 17th.
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely going to be missed. And I think the big thing here that I think people are really latching onto when it comes to her is her genuineness. When it comes to Hollywood, a lot of people think that they have to create these personas or something like that, or, pretend that they're good by being performative a lot. But she's a genuine person, just like Gene Wilder, just like Keanu Reeves. When someone is that real, that nice, like a Mr. Rogers, then you're
Bob Ross.
You're definitely going to be attracted to that, and their spirit will. When good people like that are around you, even if it's on your television screen, it makes you want to be good too.
Oh, exactly. And those people definitely usually embody that whole idea of there is such thing as like good selfishness in that sense. Like there is like something to the karma thing in that way. Like typically speaking, and these people kind of embody that to me. And I can't say always, because I do understand bad shit happens to good people, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. But typically speaking, it seems like if you work on being good, there actually is a selfish reason for being good, is that people know that you're good and also kind of treat you like you're good. You know what I mean? Like there is a benefit to being quote unquote selfless. So, and I think there's some people that embody that. And I think it's really great that we have examples like that, especially, with people kind of fighting some of the cancel culture stuff. And I know there's some stuff that we're going to talk about briefly here in a minute that's going to fold into kind of, and like how gutting it could be when you learn something about somebody you looked up to. Because, hey, I'll admit it, I really looked up to Louis C.K. I really liked his humor. He was awkward. And if you listen to him talk, like you could realize like he didn't have the mentally healthiest space, but he deflected with humor well. And I appreciate that. Patton Oswalt is another great one. And I would be gutted if I found out anything similar to what we learned about Louis C.K. Right? Because now it's like, oh my God, who would I have left? Actually, there's a new Netflix special out where I've successfully watched somebody joke about their invisible illnesses. So there's more up and coming. But as far as big ones that do it really well, Louis C.K. and Patton were kind of up there with some of those dark thought jokes, doing it well, but also kind of talking about what should be like maybe discussed with a therapist at the same time.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Patton, he got himself into a little bit of trouble. It seems that on New Year's Day, Dave Chappelle, I forgot where, but had a concert. And on New Year's Day, he had a special guest open up the show. It was Patton Oswalt. And, the crowd there ultimately went and, went nuts, had a good time. They enjoyed it. But Dave Chappelle has his own set of issues that we've kind of talked about with his, Netflix special. Okay, so we'll just pretend we didn't pause here for a moment, and ruining the secrets behind how we do everything here. But yeah, like I mentioned, Patton opened was a surprise opener for Dave Chappelle's recent concert on New Year's. But obviously, with the issues that Dave Chappelle has been dealing with because of his Netflix special, where he pronounced that he was a TERF and supporting J.K. Rowling and whatnot. The trans community got all over Patton Oswalt, and then Patton Oswalt ended up coming out with sort of an apology, but also stating that, Dave Chappelle is my friend, blah, blah, blah. And ultimately, I mean, this is a complicated issue, like, obviously, but when it comes to how Patton Oswalt dealt with the situation, that kind of annoyed me.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not privy to all of it, but it sounds like he's guilty of being friends with someone, right? It's okay. You were talking about like a few different situations, and sometimes I get them muddled.
Yeah.
So did he do anything other than be friends with Dave Chappelle, who then did a bunch of stuff? Did I miss something?
No, I just mentioned that he opened Dave Chappelle's concert on New Year's Day. While
Okay.
there are people that I'm sure would tell Patton Oswalt, why are you friends with Dave Chappelle after what he said? I think a lot of people were just upset that, Patton Oswalt did a job, for Dave Chappelle, shared the stage with him, which, like on the one hand, like I don't like Chappelle's comments. And if I were a comedian and I were asked, I would say no, but I'm not going to make a deal about it because who cares? It's like a lot of people do want to pat themselves on the back, but Patton Oswalt kind of annoyed me because it's like he wanted to share space with Chappelle and the audience that maybe believes the stuff that Dave Chappelle is thinking, while also getting the approval of the people that don't. It's like he wanted this cake to eat it too, and that just he came off as slimy when for the most part Patton Oswalt seems like a relatively decent guy.
Yeah, and here's something that I would like to put out there, because I have been asked, Reverend, how could you be friends with this human who believes this thing?
Uh-huh.
And something that, I reflect inward, right? It's no secret. I am a person who practices the shadow integration, shadow work stuff. So I am willing to ask myself these questions, like, why am I friends with this person? Is this like a good thing or what? And one of the things that I kind of came up for me is, well, if nobody is friends with them other than people who think exactly like them, what are the odds that they're actually going to see any value in changing what they believe? Because there seems to be enough for them to cling on to each other, especially with social media. So I don't know. Sometimes I do think it makes sense to be able to be someone who they learn they can have safe, frustrating conversations with. It goes back into like going into a conversation, not with the intent to change your mind, because honestly, it doesn't feel good when someone does it to me, right? Like I'd rather go into a conversation now being like curious on why they believe what they believe, and then maybe making it okay for me to share why I believe what I believe. And those conversations tend to go better than, me just saying, well, you're garbage and I'm not going to talk to you anymore. Like, I don't know. And I'm not saying I've changed anybody's mind, but I think that's where some of the joke of the Reverend comes from, is because I do tend to have some cool conversations with people, but I'm also willing to change my perspective on things. Just so far, there's not a lot of things, like there's a good handful of things that I haven't been provided anything that makes me question what I believe, like the jokes I've made about flat Earth. I don't really see there being anything out there that can be presented that will make me believe in flat Earth. Yeah. So, but I would genuinely try to hear what somebody had to say about it if they really wanted to have a conversation on why they believe what they believe and why I believe what I do. So, and I mean, I'm not saying Patton's necessarily having those conversations, because not everybody has friendships like that. But I could also see, hoping that being friends with somebody and not making them feel like there's only hate and judgment on the other side of their current beliefs might go further than just never speaking to people again.
I definitely agree with that sentiment. And, it's like part of me is conflicted here. But let's take a look at the Dave Chappelle situation here, too, because he is a comedian who, has been around for a while, obviously. And in this Netflix special said some stuff about the trans community that I disagree with. Right. And I think he is wrong. And that's okay. Because, it's like, one, he has the right to say what he wants as a comedian. Two, I also look at what other things he may or may not be doing. Is he doing something like a J.K. Rowling, who is actively supporting organizations that are anti-trans? To my knowledge, he is not. Is he doing something like an Eric Clapton, who is contributing money and trying to spread misinformation about the coronavirus? He is not. He is a comedian who gave, in my opinion, a wrong-headed commentary about the trans community, but he did his job as a comedian. And, we've talked about it before, how the job of a comedian at times is to, in their art, create conversation. And we're having that conversation. Now again, in my opinion, I feel Dave Chappelle is wrong. If he were here, I would say that to his face, but I don't think Dave Chappelle has done anything to this point that requires people to shun him. To like, if you don't want to pay for his comedy special, don't watch it. You don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if you don't watch it, you should not get a pat on the back for not doing that. But just it's like. Yes, he's wrong-headed, but we should still have those conversations with him because, again, he just did his job as a comedian. He gave his thoughts. Now we're talking about it.
Right. And it also even goes to points that I've made before, too, is this could just be a bad joke or a joke that did not land as intended. Because it goes to be like if Patton, I'm all super, super prefacing, I have not seen this. I have not seen the bits that Tim is talking about. So I am just talking about how there's a lot of similar situations that revolve around things that really could essentially be just a joke that was made poorly.
No, he came out and said he's Team TERF and, trans exclusionary radical feminist. So it's
like publicly or in the bit?
In the bit.
Oh, okay. Oh, in the bit.
In the bit.
Okay. So see, now I'm asking here is because some people do character-ish type things when they do bits. So I would be curious if he has said anything in an actual serious talking very specifically as him format that he believes these things. Because that could, in theory, be something that would explain why would Patton, somebody who seems good to us, be friends with somebody? Like, did he just make a really bad joke, or does he have a history of kind of being transphobic? I mean, I know he's had a history of making some bad jokes and definitely some jokes that didn't age well.
Yeah.
So it makes me curious is all. Like, I might watch it just to see for myself at this point, because this conversation has made me curious about why this is, because I wonder if it's just a joke that didn't read well. He's not seeming to double down on it. But see, like, once people take it a certain way, it's almost impossible to then explain, well, I was just doing a character, because really, come on, who's going to buy that? They're mad already. Honey, I didn't mean to.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I just wanted to bring this up because I felt Patton was just a dumbass. I at the end of the day, I've heard enough interviews from other people talking about Patton that I get the impression he's a good guy. And honestly, I'm going to say the same thing with Dave Chappelle. When I worked at Best Buy, I mentioned the intranet message board water cooler that they had. Dave Chappelle lives in Ohio and would go to Best Buy all the time and buy stuff. And then people that worked at that store would just comment about what a nice, respectful guy he was. Some celebrities would say, can you close the store for me so I can do my shopping without people around? But Dave Chappelle would just walk in, wouldn't ask for any sort of discounts and just buy stuff. And so it's just an unfortunate situation that hopefully over time can, lead to some positivity. I don't believe in my heart that I think Dave Chappelle is just going off of his idea of what the trans community is, I guess. I think education, I think sitting down and him talking it out and learning, I think would definitely change his mind. But, at the end of the day, he gave a joke.
Yeah. And if he did test spit it with his friends, and if they didn't maybe see the potential, like, maybe not that joke. Yeah. There's also that too, because a lot of comedians usually do that, bounce things off of each other and work jokes. So, I mean, I can't sit here and claim to know the whole story. I just understand that, it's a process to make like a set for these purposes.
Yes.
So I'm sure there was a lot of thought that went into it. And then unfortunately it does happen where a joke just does not work as well as you think it can, even if you think that you are of a caliber that could get away with it. There's always a risk when you make certain jokes. And if he decided to take that risk and it went the bad way, I could see that as a potential explanation of, why person I think is good, now looks like they are saying bad thing.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if he's going to respond to this and what that response is going to be.
Well, I know when the Chappelle special came out on Netflix, there was a big hubbub with Netflix employees. I guess there was some trans employees at Netflix that that, ended up ultimately leaving the company, having arguments with the CEO. And it's important that the trans community does stand up to point out when, like misinformation, negative or just incorrect information is being given, because, as we show every day on the news, this country doesn't make it easy for people to get their rights. So by all means, continue to fight that good fight if somebody does go out there and say something. But, Patton just should have knew better. It's like hang out backstage, be at the concert, like getting up on stage. He invited this nonsense, to come his way. And Chappelle, I just hope, because a lot of it too, I think, could come down to pride because of the brouhaha that happened in the media. I can see myself easily, stating, I'm not going to respond to everybody. They're all wrong,
Yeah.
But anyway, and with that, I think, enough of Patton Oswalt, enough of Dave Chappelle. Let's talk about some Big Mouth.
Yay! Green-eyed monster.
Yes, we are continuing our in-depth discussion on Big Mouth Season 5, and we are up to the episode called The Green-Eyed Monster. Now, before we dive into the themes, did you like the episode?
Oh, yeah. I think this is one of my favorite ones, like so far in the rewatch. And I'll go into that a little bit more whenever we do the scoring in the end. But I did find it really enjoyable. And I think they did a great job making visual representations of emotions, which is essentially a big draw to Big Mouth. But what about you?
So far, I think this is probably, of the 4 episodes, probably the most solid episode to date. There was one part I didn't really like at all, but which I thought dragged it down. But overall, I think it was pretty solid. But before we talk about Big Mouth, let's talk about some of the themes. Now, one of the big themes in the episode that I saw was love blindness. What do I mean by that? That moment when you are so in love with somebody that they are the absolute most perfect person in the world. Nothing I have ever done before myself. As a kid, though, I can imagine how tough that because I've dealt with that before, how tough that is dealing with that, because this is so new. It's like this is the first time you get feelings for another person that are that intense. And yeah, what do you think? Do you have any memories?
Oh gosh, I mean, loads. And that's what makes this episode so incredibly good and relatable, aside from one part with a slight tweak to the story would have been totally acceptable. But I know we're going to get into that with the good and bad, because I skimmed some of your notes before I dove in with mine. But yeah, basically I wasn't taught how to regulate my emotions as a kid. So of course it was like a fucking roller coaster with no seatbelt. It felt like at times, right? And now it's like I've learned a lot, and I know there's terms like, hey, NRE, for example, really kind of describes a lot of those feelings. Even if you're not in or boyfriend and girlfriend, you can still have NRE type chemical responses in your brain. This is some science stuff here too, folks. There's a lot that happens to you when you meet somebody, and that's why you can stay up from dawn until dusk, talking on the phone or trading text messages and just learning about each other. There's actually something going on in your body and in your brain that is encouraging and fueling all of that. And that's why that does eventually die off. Now, I wish somebody had known to tell me that was something to go through, because I think honestly, we could cover some of this stuff with kids and make it not so jarring to experience, right? It's kind of we cover parts of puberty now, so it's not so alarming. So, I don't think I'm bleeding internally one day. I had a talk, but we don't talk about how the brain works in certain situations. So it's really kind of fun to watch it play out and then realize this still happens to adults because we're still not learning how to regulate.
Yeah, and like with NRE, for example, it's only been relatively recently that I've become aware of that. So, like, I think a lot of the problem is people like know that you can get this way when you fall for somebody, but without, I guess, being able to put a name to a face, I guess I can see where maybe it can be a little difficult to relate to a kid, just things that they can do to kind of take a breath,
Yeah, like, again, there's certain things that we teach about like our bodies when they grow up. So, because I know there's things that, people with penises were taught in sex ed that I wasn't taught, so that they weren't alarmed by things, right? Like there are things that we do teach, but we still don't do anything for this thing that will most likely happen to somebody. Because even asexual people do get romantic feelings. It's actually one of the most misunderstood things about asexual people is that they don't have romantic feelings. It's not that they don't have romantic feelings. So, or even like strong platonic feelings, which this episode goes into very well as well, and how that can be just as vital and important feeling to somebody as like romantic feelings, even though the romantic feelings are what we really cover more often, which is one of the things I super loved about this episode was they did give that space for platonic love matters too, and can also be very strong.
Very much so, very much so. But speaking of that, another theme that they talked about here was being scared to talk to a friend about something they did which upset you. And that's kind of in line with the Missy conversation, how she ultimately was upset at something Jesse did and then didn't talk to her right away. But by not talking to her, she let her brain make it a much more serious situation than it ultimately was.
Right, and that goes to the kind of learning how to communicate, and how even into adulthood, if you don't recognize like how sucky it can be when you hold on to something to the point that when you do approach them about it, you are so worked up that all of that energy comes out of you. Because I have already watched through all of this before, so I love paying attention to certain scenarios like as they happen. Because there is later going to be a callback to this conversation between Jesse and help me here. Missy, thank you. Missy and Jesse. I don't know how I spaced on that name, but Missy and Jesse. So there's a callback in one of the later episodes. So I really wanted to pay attention to this happening this time. And there is kind of part of me that, Missy had a lot of energy and basically bull charged up to Jesse. So I kind of even understand how Jesse got a little defensive and how that led into bitchiness, because they were both kind of being not so great to each other, right? Yeah. Because Missy was so concerned about having this conversation because she didn't know how, that by the time she had worked it up, there was so much fucking energy behind it. Like, I'm just surprised that Jesse, there wasn't like some visual of her being blown into the wall. Because rewatching it and trying to pick apart the scene, I was like, okay, so I actually kind of understand why Jesse got defensive like immediately.
Yeah, and I think I've been on both sides of that particular thing myself. So, I and especially I related so much to Missy in this episode just because of that. I mean, it can be really tough to be able to go to somebody that you care about, friend or whatever, and say something you did hurt me. Yeah. And it's like you don't always want to have those conversations, but then from there again, resentment, anger, your brain can just make things far, far worse than what it is. So
especially if you're the type of person to troubleshoot the shit out of shit, which Missy is, like, right, she has a little bit of that anxiety about her when it comes to figuring things out and being smart. So she could have even been making so many possible what if situations that she created some anger and resentment by the time she approached Jesse. And that is something that I have seen my adult friends do. So it's just kind of funny how excellent, and those are the episodes I tend to love the best with Big Mouth, is when it is successful at showing something that did happen in childhood that still very obviously happens with a lot of adults that haven't learned like some of the ways to regulate the situations.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to get into a situation to where you're already judging somebody guilty and issuing a sentence against them without giving them a chance to defend themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. The next theme here: falling for someone who is seeing someone else.
Ooh.
Yes. I remember back to high school. My sister's friend at the time that she had known ever since like second grade, around high school, I discovered she was a girl. Hey, imagine that. And, started liking her at that point. But she also had a boyfriend in high school that she had just broken up with, but was still trying to be nice and trying to be friends. But I was there and just trying to get her attention and was it was just exactly like the Jesse, Allie, and Samira situation in the episode. And I was the Jesse part.
Oh, gotcha. But I mean, at this point, they're friends though, right? Jesse and Allie. Like It hasn't, because I mean, spoilers, and I think you've seen a few ahead now, right? So
yeah, I know what happens. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, like it does turn romantic, but watching the episode, it doesn't quite yet in this episode. So as far as going through what's been displayed so far, that hasn't happened yet. Mm-hmm. It turning romantic for her, which is kind of another thing of how friendships can turn romantic sometimes. But yeah, but the purposes of this episode, they were kind of displaying it as a jealousy that can happen when you're really, really into your friendship with somebody, but they are spending time with their boyfriend or girlfriend. Mm-hmm. So I did think they successfully showed how that can be a thing, that you can have like kind of that level of almost possessiveness in your friendships that can be kind of toxic if it's left unchecked.
Yeah, I mean, like I've heard like married people mention, like they would have, like sometimes they would have friends that they don't see anymore because they get married. They're spending all this time with this person. So, a relationship is a relationship, whether it's sexual or not, and people are going to react accordingly, So
exactly.
Yeah. Next topic here. Being a side piece, a secret boyfriend or girlfriend for somebody. This happened to Jay in the episode, but I can see the more hormones affect teenagers to where maybe that has happened to people. And that's like sad that the little kid has to, be in a situation to where they crave attention so much that they're willing to put themselves through essentially being humiliated because they're the pretend boyfriend or girlfriend,
Yeah. And this is kind of the beginning of, that kind of little storyline with Jay, because that one continues on for a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And I've being the unpopular kid in school, there was a few times of brief, like they were maybe my boyfriend for a day, but it was a secret. And then it was mostly like, you know what, this isn't worth the political risk of my stance at this school. I mean, they didn't say it that way, but that's how I've kind of processed it in my age. And basically it wasn't politically popular to date me. So they just decided the next day, to go ahead and cash in on that immediate return policy. And just like, if you break up within a week, it doesn't really count, right?
They kept the receipt, I guess.
I literally had a boy talk me into like a secret boyfriend girlfriend relationship, and then by the time I got home he broke up with me. Like he called me, he was waiting to call me. It was so like, it wasn't funny at the time, but like now I think about that happened, I'm like, that's actually funny. Like it wasn't to experience, but the fact that it happened is kind of humorous to me.
And you're like rushing to the phone thinking, my love is on the phone. Hello, darling.
Oh, you just couldn't wait to talk to me, could you, Josh? Asshole. Anyway.
It had to be a Josh.
Had to be a Josh.
All right. Last theme here. Finding out the one you love someone else.
Bum, bum, bum.
hard feeling at any time. I mean, in this episode, it relayed more to when Nick found out that Jesse had his brother's shirt. But it can definitely be a kick in the gut. But if anything, I mean, I think for kids, as an adult, my kids were a little younger, I would tell them, for a situation like this, just, Nick in this case obviously didn't. His love for Jesse was self-created, and like he didn't talk to her, and yet he had all these feelings, and then saw her life moving on, and like, if anything, this has to be a good example of telling your kids to talk to another person, because if this person is truly interested in you, then they're going to say yes. Or if they're not interested in you in a certain way, they're 9 times out of 10, people are not going to be assholes. They're going to be flattered and say, "Oh, that means a lot. Thank you." But no, they're not going to laugh at you. It's not like a TV sitcom where, they grab the freshman and dunk their head in the toilet or something.
Yeah, it's like the two key things to this episode are like communication and emotional regulation. Like if people had maybe talked more and knew skills for emotional regulation for times that it's going to be hard to emotionally regulate, so you're not jarred by it, it could have totally made this episode boring, right? Like if that were normal instead. But it goes back to, this is truly kind of what is more normal and hasn't really seemed to be a skill that a lot of people naturally pick up. I don't know, because you've even talked to me about, that you work on your communication. I know communication is something I work on. I don't like feeling misunderstood. And, whenever you got a past where you just feel generally misunderstood, this is why maybe some of us over communicate, folks.
Yeah.
But good episode though, overall. I liked all the themes that they covered, but.
Well, speaking of good, what is on your list of good for the episode?
Well, numero uno is, because it piggybacked off of what was good from the last episode, before we took our little stint to Christmas break, was the whole topic of platonic love. Jessie and her love bug, Sonia. I love how this was the episode where it really broke it down to Jessie, where she was confused, right? She initially was saying, but how can I love her? Like, I just want to be her friend. And Sonia was able to kind of say, yo, yeah, I mean, this exists too. Like, you only want to talk to them. You want to hang out and make dumb little silly sayings together. And there was nothing romantic about it. And so I really, really can't appreciate enough actually having some value and appreciation paid towards platonic love. Mm-hmm. And then also the toxic side of it, how you can be jealous to a level with your friend, even though it is not like a romantic relationship, but it very mirrors things that we've recognized as bad and romantic, like that ownership, right? The possessiveness that was going on. Mm-hmm. So that was one good thing. Another one was Adam West. I'm pretty sure that's the guest star on this one. If I'm not messing up that name, because I really like that actor, and that's who they based Mr. Keating off of. And you can actually tell, you could hear his voice from Parks and Rec and a few other things. He's just kind of that funny, nerdy guy. So I like him. I little bit dude crush on him sometimes. So I really enjoyed that they made the character look like him and kind of have some of his mannerisms and stuff in a way. So I appreciated that. And then we'll get back to the rest of that storyline later. But that was one good thing I appreciated about the Andrew storyline. And then also just the irrational actions when you let jealousy take over. The green-eyed monster was pretty much nailed across the board. I felt super, super well done. Mm-hmm. Even to a point of the storyline with Andrew. And I'll get into that one more on the bad side, I think. But I did still, because, there's the hots for teacher thing. And that does happen, like getting a crush on your teacher, getting a crush even on your babysitter, and finding out that your babysitter has a boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, you know what I mean? Or your teacher, and then your teacher's married. So it's interesting that some of the themes carry on. dude, I heard girls talk about this one substitute teacher that we had. And I'm like, my God, you're children. Like in my head back then, I even thought it was kind of creepy. Like I thought he was cute, but like some of the things like the junior high and high school girls said, I was like, you guys are dogs, man.
What do they have in the water in Texas? Hey.
Well, pregnancy and
Well, for me on the good side, I feel the past few episodes I've kind of been down on John Mulaney, so I tried to look for something good on this episode, and there was one line delivery that he did that I thought was funny. It's like, "So nice to meet you, beat not." Just how he did the not just had me laughing there. Overall, the storyline with Jessie in this episode was top notch, in showing how oblivious she was to Samira. Just was another nice touch, because it a lot of times, like Hollywood, it gets a little dumb with characters. They think they want to, if a character is supposed to hurt somebody, then they had to have intentionally done it. But in this case, they showed that, Jessie was just being oblivious to how her actions were being portrayed. She wasn't,
wasn't trying to annoy Samira, but Samira was taking it very aggressively. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So I definitely appreciated that. Also, the slow evolution of the love bug to the hate worm. Again, well done, because again, as established to this point, Nick's love for Jessie has been primarily in his head. And with it going off the rails like it did, to see it evolve like that, it's just, it brings back a lot of unfortunate memories, but well done. Well done.
Yeah, I didn't think they went into the hate worm yet. Is it the very end of the episode?
No. I'm sorry.
Oh, gotcha.
It's the evolution. He's not there yet, but it's getting there, because
you're seeing those early signs, of him changing.
He wasn't shaved. He, was like a little more on edge. Like he'd been up for 16 hours and then been on like 3 pots of coffee or something like that.
Yep, love there's healthy and unhealthy levels of it.
Yeah.
So I loved seeing kind of some of Walter's transition into what he eventually becomes as the hate worm. And right now you don't really know that that's what's going on. Mm-hmm. But so I did have a good quote from Andrew that I wanted to also throw in there. I had moved my quotable quotes down to the bottom of my notes for some reason. I did also love the grandpa heart thing. My doctor says I have grandpa heart. Whenever he's like, he puts Mr. Keating's hand on his chest, and then like for some reason the immediate callback to it made it funnier when he's later at like some club and finds Mr. Keating. He's stalking him. Mm-hmm. He said, I let the bouncer, like, and Mr. Keating's like, how did you even get in here? And he said, I let the bouncer feel my heartbeat and got a senior discount. Like for some reason that immediate callback was really, that was a good one. That was, I'll give Andrew a good one for that.
And good writing, because even though Big Mouth is a cartoon, it's not reality, it's not a documentary, at least the writers went out of their way to give the audience a reason, a reason, even though logically it wouldn't happen in real life. It's like in that world, you can accept it.
Yeah. The only other quotable quote I realized I missed was about the car, Jay's pants car, whenever he and Matthew are talking in the hall, and Matthew says, I'm sorry, you have a car? And Jay replies, yeah, I don't really drive it. It's just for pants. And then it just like pans out there and there's this car of pants. I don't know. Those 2 moments like literally made me laugh out loud, even the second time watching it. So I wanted to share those as well.
Well, let's bring your mood down. What did you think was bad?
Womp womp, Andrew Beer. So yeah, it's no surprise. I mean, even with commentary in this very episode leading up to this very moment of this recording, not a big fan of Andrew's story lately. This was by far my least favorite for Andrew. It just seems creepy and unnecessary at this point, what they're doing with his character. And he's feeling less and less realistic, which is pulling me away from his character on the show. I would have been interested in a Got Hots for Teacher storyline, or like I said, a babysitter situation, like all of that stuff would have made sense at this age, teacher. But it definitely works with the jealousy monster, right? Because again, it goes into but he's married, that exists there, like in that Hots for Teacher thing. So they could have done that in a way that just wasn't so hyperbolic that it took it away. Definitely pulled me out of that realistic relatableness that I like in this show. I also really don't like pothead dad direction they're going with Jesse's dad. Granted, I mean, he was stoned and not expecting Nick to come by.
Right.
But it just makes it doesn't feel good to see Greg going with does he really not know her birthday, or was he just so high that he forgot her birthday? Is that the joke they're going with? Because I don't know if I really like either. I don't know, if you're that high, should you be answering the door if you look through and it's a child?
Yeah, in your underwear. Wasn't he like in his underwear and a t-shirt? Oh
God, probably. Probably, but exactly. Like I don't like the direction that Jesse's dad is going, especially since like she got to move in with him and like live with him to go back. Yeah. I was just kind of hoping they wouldn't go that way with him, but there's still time to see what they ultimately end up doing. And then the last, but definitely not the. Oh God, this is like probably. Fucking just Coach Steve cameo. Like, could we just have one episode where his stupid fucking face isn't on it for no reason? Like, if it had served anything to it, but he literally showed up, made a stupid comment about his eyeballs exploding and then showing back up, and then he was gone. And it's like, I just kind of wish they had left him out. Like, I'm now kind of annoyed with Coach Steve to the point that I'm wondering if they're just going to kill him off. So they're just trying to kill you with him so that you're fine with it if it happens. But if they're not doing that, it's just gotten annoying at this point where it's like, can you just not put him in a few episodes on purpose? Make me miss him a little and then let him be a good callback.
Absence does make the heart grow fonder. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and for my bad, he's definitely on there. My note simply said, fuck Coach Steve. Because
you put it so much more eloquently than me.
Yeah, it was just pointless. It was there my eyeballs are gone now. They're back. And what was the point?
I hate how much you sound like him through my headphones. God.
I hate that I sound like him too.
Oh, that's unfortunate and funny. So funny now. Anyway, but like he served no purpose. Like it would have been different if they had tried to make him make sense, but he was just there in one of the jealousy rage fantasies.
It was 10 seconds of screen time, if that. I mean, literally, he wasn't there.
So why?
He wasn't there for long. The other thing that really, the couple other things that really stuck out as bad. One, Nick's dad. I don't like Fred Armisen, and I don't like his take on this father character. Like, I think it's too 1970s sitcom cliche of what that type of father is, and just like, I don't know, just that I don't like him. Also, the Andrew storyline, there was no reason to do the story the way they did it,
right?
like you could have a jealousy issue, but like, I don't believe that a 12 or 13-year-old boy is going to be doing the things that Andrew ultimately does in that particular episode, because they were they were mimicking a lot of like Fatal Attraction, single white female type of stuff, and
like kind of some serial killer vibe too, right? Like,
it puts the lotion on its skin. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it seems, I'm glad that I am not the only one who thought this is just not realistic. Now, slight tweak. I could have seen him still kind of having that man crush on him and getting jealous because of the daddy attention thing. Right. Like, so that can happen as well. And that would have been another good opportunity to show a jealousy monster in a way that isn't as directly related to like, oh, well, they already have a girlfriend and they're my teacher, because we already have a girlfriend situation going on. So it is kind of interesting. Like, they could have done it differently and had an opportunity to make Andrew a little bit more of a real character. And right now, I just don't view him as a real or serious character at this point.
Yeah, because like, how can the audience relate to someone who did everything he did in that episode? We're supposed to like Andrew, yet look at everything he did. You know, breaking into people's houses, doing all the emotional, manipulative stuff that he did with that teacher. Just nothing. There was nothing relatable in that character. There's nothing redeemable. There's nothing likable about Andrew right now.
Right. Like, he used to just be the awkward kind of loser kid that hung out with Nick, who was kind of the cool guy. Like, that was the way I took Andrew. And now it's just like, I don't know if they're just trying to make him more interesting or what. It's not playing well with me, though. Like, I would almost be okay if Andrew wasn't in the show, except he's kind of one of the main characters. So this is where it starts getting into the, oh man, is this one character going to be so grating that I don't enjoy watching the show anymore? Is it going to keep taking me out of what I like about this to the tune that I don't watch it? Yeah. Well, do we stop and just move on to like something that's concluded? Because I know we've talked about that, like, our future shows, when we pick them, we would like them to go ahead and be done, just so we can record through and do an entire series. So it's been really cool doing the Big Mouth one, but now I'm like, man, I hope they do something to turn that around, because as good as some of the other characters are, I could see the Coach Steve-ness and the way that Andrew's going just really be something that would drive me away from this show.
Because it seems like with Andrew, at least, they're trying to normalize some behaviors with his character that I don't think should be normalized, that I don't think should be brought for laughs. I don't like being that much of an obsessive person over someone you're in a romantic relationship with is dangerous. And maybe that was the point, I guess. But again, trying to make the audience like him while he does all this stuff, you can't do that.
Yeah, it kind of crossed the line of that relatableness. Like, I'm willing to relate to somebody who maybe sought for a good example, like a good role model, right? Like, I understand that, but to the levels that this, child went about this, like, that doesn't really make you want to be on their side. It makes you want them to go away. That's what the bad guys do, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're normalizing it, but it does seem super unclear if Andrew's character is really a disturbed person, or if they really are just trying to make this joke as if any of this is normal, like the rest of the stuff are.
Yeah. And we'll see in future episodes. Now, what score did you give this?
I gave it an 8 out of 10. This episode definitely had more good than bad and really hit the nail on the head for unchecked jealousy and lack of emotional regulation and how that can affect relationships. The only thing that I really, really wish they could have changed is the storyline with Andrew. I think that would have made it even better. But since I've already been so frustrated with Andrew's character, it's just not news at this point. So it just wasn't worth bringing it down any further when they did such a good job with so many other relationships.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. The score I gave it was 7 out of 10. What's really knocked it down for me was the Andrew storyline. They just could have done that better, because there should be stories about obsession. There should be stories about this in this show, so that people can talk about it, about why it's not healthy and all that. But again, it seems like they just wanted to celebrate his very, very bad behavior in this episode. But everything else, just firing on. They were firing on all cylinders for the most part in this episode. So this is a not miss episode.
Yeah, like, I wouldn't skip it. It's more just an episode where I am noting that I don't like what they're doing with character. Yeah. But the rest and the meat and the potatoes of the episode, the green-eyed monster and the different ways that can like manifest and come out, super, super head on, to the point of please watch it, especially if you're the type of person that considers yourself, a slave to your emotions, or, you've had little outbursts and gone, God, why did I do that? Like, afterwards. It's a good visual representation of that, because you had mentioned something about NRE earlier, about when you have a name, how you're able to kind of look at it more objectively. And there is a little saying a lot in counseling is name it to tame it. So, if you could maybe see something that helps you name some of your behaviors as some kind of form of jealousy, it might be worth exploring that in yourself. But yeah, super, super dead on things. So it's worth watching.
Indeed. And that will wrap us up for this week. Yay.
Whoop, whoop. Yay.
Now, before we do wrap up, you've had a month to prepare. Do you have an update for the audience on There Is Life After Trauma, the podcast?
I do not yet. I am going to do a little bit more planning. Definitely in the latest, it will be February. I had to push a little bit because apparently it was really cute of me to think I was going to do stuff the first week I came back from 2 weeks off. Yeah. And then with this snowstorm, it's kind of like caused some complications in other projects in my life. But yes, I am going to work on a list of topics and have a handful of episodes ready to record when the Mr. Reverend is out of town in February at the latest. So I'm hoping that means that I should have some episodes ready to roll as early as sometime in February, as late as March. So I'm still kind of fine-tuning some of that planning I said I would be doing in January, and I'm really excited about it. So I hope you guys, some of you would want to join along with the conversation. I think it'll be good and worth having.
I'm definitely excited for it as well. As we record this past Wednesday was the very first episode of Hump Day.
Woohoo! Yay, Hump Day.
Yeah, so definitely excited about that. And yeah, just excited about the changes here we are doing on the Friends Talking Nerdy podcast network.
Shameless plug. And with that,
anything else you want to bring up?
No, I think actually the Mr. Reverend might be starting his trek homeward. So I wanted to be in his ear just so, if somebody slides into him, I can call 911 or something. No, I'm sure he'll be fine. I just want to keep him company.
Comes on the dog sled,
Oh gosh, maybe he'll just that's how we get our dog. He will just find one on the way home and tame it, and it will bring him. But anywho,
Bernard with whiskey,
Yeah, I'm just gonna go warm up some easy food I had ready and stay warm. I guess I'm gonna see. It looked like it was still snowing earlier, but it may have stopped finally. But it's been several inches, and I'm sure we'll have some kind of count in the morning. So,
well, hopefully it won't bury you too much. So.
Yep, as long as I don't have to move the car.
Won't make that mistake again. Well, again, that wraps us up for another week. Each Saturday here in this podcast space, we will have something to entertain your ear holes. Until we meet you again, we bid you adieu.
And a happy new year.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.